Okay, so I'm back. Well, we actually haven't left our chairs, but effectively, for anybody watching this video, Janet and I are back to talk more about World Anvil, and we're going to get into some of the other questions that occurred to me about World Anvil. Now, I've used it a little bit, but I had to restrain myself because I was so excited about the concept and what I'd seen Chris Fox talk about, and then I'd spent time talking to Killian Carter on Messenger, and I said,
"Good egg."
"What's it like?" And then he was getting all enthusiastic about it, and I thought, this sounds amazing, and I would have killed for this when I was doing a lot more role playing. It would have been utterly amazing to me, and it looks so beautiful. And there's a certain part of me that thinks, oh no, I'll be able to use it, but I definitely won't be able to make things look quite as pretty as a lot of these people have done with their worlds. So yeah, I'll be asking some questions that I could probably answer myself if I played with it a bit more. So could you talk about the pricing model of the different levels of membership that you've got, so you can just explain them briefly to the audience what levels are you have?
Yeah, sure.
And what the major difference and why they should go from one to another.
Yeah, definitely. So we start at Journeyman at the bottom, which is about $3 a month. It's actually a little bit less. And the way we do our subscriptions is you can get a month, 3 months, 6 months, or a year, right? And the longer you take, it's slightly cheaper, as all subscriptions everywhere. Anybody who's ever bought anything knows how this works.
Yeah.
And essentially, if you're starting out, that is where I suggest you start out. Particularly for authors, I would say right now, unless you're planning on uploading a ton of images, Journeyman's probably where you want to be. Like, if you're just writing, if you're just using it for the privacy features that you get, a little bit more space, a couple more worlds, that's what you get from a Journeyman compared to a Freeman membership, right? And it's like I say, it's under $3 a month, so it's less than a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
Then there's the Master membership, which gives you some more worlds. It gives you some more co-author slots. Co-authors are a guild perk. You can use them. You get a certain number with any tier, and it increases as the tiers increase.
Right.
And co-authors can be co-owners who have access to everything in your world. They can be editors who have access to only the articles and the timelines and things, but they can't change the world settings. And then you have writers, which can submit drafts for you to approve and edit and do with as you wish, but they cannot see any private articles in your world. Now, there's lots of reasons why you might want to use writers. One of them is, for example, is a Patreon reward. One of them is a beta reader who might be filling in, potentially have read your book and be filling in articles in your world building. But obviously you want to look over those before you give them the tick off, and you want to keep your private things private. So those are the 3 co-author slots. And we find a lot of people using World Anvil for co-authoring. We even have a couple of computer games companies using it to keep their world Bible in because of the co-author slots. Because if somebody's in Manila and somebody's in New York, you can still all access the same database from your discrete accounts, essentially. Yeah. And then Grandmaster gives you some more perks. Again, you get more worlds, more co-authors. You get more functionality from the maps. So you can draw polygons and lines, I think, which is not available with the other tiers. I should really have the page up while I'm talking about these things.
Yeah, I'm just looking at it, trying to work out which. I mean, obviously, folks, if you're looking at World Anvil, there's a very well laid out page which will explain these things to you. But it's better to have some of this from Janet.
Yeah. So essentially, as you go up in price, you get more stuff.
Yeah.
As always. You get access to things.
Not as always. I've come across plenty of software where you think, is that really a difference? Or am I just paying more? So no.
Yeah. So as I look at this, as a Grandmaster, you get access to polygons. You can create your own marker pins. So, for example, if you are if you're creating a map that you want to use for your main series and you want to publish that map so that people can see it, and you're doing, for example, a really idiosyncratic sci-fi series, you can make your own map pins that theme with the sci-fi series, and then upload them, and then
so a little spaceship as opposed to a pin icon.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And you can have spaceships and the right architectural shapes for your cultures that you come up with, or whatever it is that you want to do. Basically, you get more personalization options. You get, with any guild membership, you get no adverts, but for grandmasters and above, you get no adverts for your visitors as well.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So basically your worlds are ad free.
Yeah.
And then we move to the Sage functionality. Now the Sage functionality is our professional tier that gives you 1,000 subscribers instead of 20. So it's better for people who are running Patreons. It's better for people who want to give rewards to people or give beta reader access to people. It gives, basically it's more professional. It gives you white labeling, which means that you can take off a certain amount of the World Anvil branding, and you can also customize your world slugs. So you can make them simpler and easier to direct people to. So it would be World Anvil /w/world rather than something more complicated, essentially. So it's all focused on helping people with that next step, helping people have a full world wiki publicly, privately, and then as rewards, and helping that be the slickest, most professional thing that you can do.
Fantastic. Yeah. So you can really get down into the weeds of different levels of access, and I'm guessing you can mark content as can you mark content as being spoiler content?
Yeah, you can mark spoilers, you can mark redacted, you can have secrets that are available to subscribers but not available to regular viewers.
Yeah.
The advanced privacy features are pretty freaking rigorous. So for example, you can have maps with map layers.
Yeah.
And then you can choose who can see which map layers.
Yeah.
So you can have only your subscribers of $20 and above can see the special map layer that shows you all the political regions for the last 20 years, or shows you a particular group of map pins that denote where your main characters are at this point in your writing. Yeah. This kind of stuff.
So can you do that sort of level of restriction with co-authors, for instance, and then can you open up the secret bits of the world to the co-authors? Or
no, so co-authors essentially, because we figure that by the time you're working with somebody, they probably need to have visible access to what's going on, right? So no, with co-authors, either they can see all the articles, or they cannot see the articles.
Right. Okay. Yeah. No, that's fine. Just as long as, because I'm sure that is a question that some people would ask.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing I would say is that if it's a feature request, put it in. Yeah. And what will happen is, if we don't understand it, we will contact you and say, why do you want this thing? What's it for?
Yeah,
to help us understand what you want to use it for.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense, yes.
And if it sounds like something sensible and you have a sensible use case for it, well, we'll add it to the list and it'll happen.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's fantastic. And the feature list, folks, for anybody who hasn't looked at the website, it is huge. There's an awful lot of advantages. You know, awful lot of features on here that I can see being extremely useful to authors, particularly if you are if you're doing fantasy and sci-fi. But I mean, also if you were doing thrillers, you're going to have a whole bunch of you know, you're going to have a whole bunch of secret organizations or whatever that you might want to talk about.
So my second book was set in 1768, after the 7 Years' War, before the American Revolution, and I used World Anvil to figure out what Europe looked like in 1768, and I have historical maps in there. I use actual still existing historical buildings, and I found blueprints for them, and I uploaded them onto World Anvil, and I have layers, so I have the stories, and I can figure out where everything is. So when I'm doing scenes in historical buildings, I know exactly where people are standing in those buildings. I know exactly what they can see from this window. It was phenomenally useful. And it does have a touch of fantasy, but it's essentially a historical adventure novel. And World Anvil was invaluable, like figuring out where things are, figuring out how people travel to different places. And even things like having a timeline where I could be like, oh yeah, well, I've got this many years until this happens. And this person is wandering around London at this point, but this person has now moved to Bologna, like real historical figures.
Sure.
So I could make sure that people were turning up in the right cities and it was historically accurate. This is all stuff that I wouldn't have attempted it without World Anvil. And the minute I had World Anvil, it was like, oh, actually, this is doable because the information exists and I can put it in a usable nexus.
Great. And there's a really good timeline feature in there, I think, isn't there?
Yeah, you can have parallel timelines as well. So you can create your timeline, and then when you create historical entries, you can decide which timelines they show up in.
Yeah.
So you can put it in one or multiple or whatever you want, essentially, which is fantastic because if you're tracking different things in different countries, but then there are certain things that are global events, well, fantastic. You know, you have that functionality.
Yeah, no, that's really cool as well, especially because presumably that also means that timeline A could be visible to everyone, and timeline B you can restrict if you want to.
But you can go more granular if you want to. So you can make historical events invisible as well if you want to.
Oh right. Yeah.
Or subscriber only.
So what even you might can you make? Do you mean you can make specific events invisible on the timeline? So there's a timeline, but you see the level. Wow, that's really cool.
Yeah, you can give specific subscriber access. So you can choose pretty much completely what people see, which is really important for authors.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Apart from anything else, if somebody has, if somebody has bought book number 1, you don't want them to see the timeline from book number 3, right? So you put them in the correct subscriber group.
Yeah.
And then they don't have access to spoilers.
Yes, there might be historical events that it's okay for them to know about or be reminded about, or particularly if you're writing in the real world where you might want to say, let me remind you when such and such was invented. I could see that being advantageous. So if you're writing under pen names, can you have one world? So if you've got your author account, your account as an author, are the accounts linked? If you've got 2 worlds, can everybody see that they're from the same person?
Right now, yes, because that's something that has never come up before.
No, okay.
But again, if it's something that would be important for people, it's definitely something we can look into. The other thing is that we've seen publishing houses that release the worlds of different IPs under the same account. Yeah. So that's a way to go as well.
Yes. Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I could see it being useful for some people because there's a proportion of people, most people are like me. I write fantasy and sci-fi, so they write 2 genres where, some people say, oh, people only read sci-fi or fantasy, and I'm like, I've never met anybody, who does that. I'm sure there must be some people, but pretty much all my friends read both to some extent. But there are genres that you might not want the audiences to mix, and that's part of the reason of having a pen name. It can be.
Oh yeah, totally.
So
no, I mean
I could see, but it's only going to be if you attract people who need that request. So so folks, if you're thinking of World Anvil and you've got some pen name restriction where you don't want people to know about your other pen name, just let Janet know, because they can't have features that nobody can use.
Absolutely. I mean, that's definitely something that we could look into if it's something that would be useful for people. And one of the things that is really important to mention right now is that we are just about to do a massive writers update.
Yes.
Now that is going to include basically we want it easier to make your worlds. We want it easier for writers to write in World Anvil if that is what they would like to do. Yeah. So we're going to have a cleaned up interface. Currently we use BB code, which is fairly universal and very easy to learn. But when you're writing, particularly writing at speed, you don't need a huge amount of formatting, but you do need specific formatting. Yes, so one of the things that we want to bring in is what you see is what you get formatting, where it basically, so it works like Microsoft Word or Google Docs or whatever you're writing in. We have some plans, which I can't fully reveal, but We have been looking at Scrivener and trying to understand why people enjoy it so much. And there is some functionality from there that we'd like to be bringing into World Anvil.
Yeah.
Particularly with writing containers.
Yeah.
And I'm not willing to say much more about that, because essentially I don't want to tell you that we're going to do things and then we figure out that actually the delivery is harder, or it needs to be delayed or whatever. I want I don't want to promise things I'm not going to deliver on. So these are the things we're looking at. We're looking at a more rigorous plotting system for authors. We're looking at a better way for people to showcase their worlds and to showcase specifically their long form writing.
I mean, this is not the only update you'll do that will be relevant to authors. This is simply a bundle of updates that are specific to authors. And you know, with Scrivener, I think the difference between it and Word, other than that Scrivener is not crash happy in quite the same way, is that you know, I've got a computer now with 16 gig of RAM. I don't trust Word to let me scroll up and down it quickly.
Right.
You know, I mean, it's kind of laggy, and it always has been, and it's because it's, you know, yeah, what it is. But one of the great things about Scrivener is that you can, you know, each scene or chapter is its own little text file, and they're little files to start, but you can then drag and drop them around, which might sound crazy to people who don't do much writing, but actually if you're writing Game of Thrones and you've got multiple viewpoint characters, you might realize that you've gone through you've just written 3 chapters of the same person, right? Chronologically it doesn't need to display like that,
right, because
you're following their viewpoint, and it's better to
right, you want to chop it up and mix it around, essentially. Absolutely.
You want to move it around. So Scrivener is good for that. So can you, I presume you can, is there a writing environment you can export from right now, or
right now you can export in HTML,
right,
which if it's a text heavy file is not going to give you any grief at all. That's absolutely fine. And essentially that exports to something very, very pure and not particularly beautiful. If you are exporting from heavily CSS'd articles with loads of sidebars and loads of embedded images, doesn't look great.
No.
If you're just exporting text, it's fine. It's really okay. You can export entire worlds, or you can export single articles. So essentially, if you've written in World Anvil and you want to export it, you can just do that into an HTML and copy paste it to wherever you want it to be.
Because I can see that being a concern for people. They want to know that they can get their data back out. The pictures aren't so much of an issue because presumably you're smart enough to keep those separately, but
backed up somewhere,
directly into World Anvil, knowing that you can get them back out, even if you have to do a little bit of formatting because you chuck a load of CSS in there. That's reassuring. And then for the writing, you could just do a plain article, and you get relatively plain HTML at the moment, but you're planning to, you know, to do a different writing environment for stuff like that in the future. So that's great. Would you be likely to add any kind of, are you looking to add any editing track changes stuff to that at some point in the future? Again,
that's a very interesting question. It's something, as I mentioned, we're still in the midst of deploying our previous features. So right now, Dimitri and I have talked about what we want in this writer's update, and that's something that hasn't come up yet. So that's definitely something that we will have to talk about.
There's an alternative that there's another piece of software that people have been using, and it hasn't gone as well as anybody, including the creators, had hoped. But it was specifically only for writing. It wasn't for, you know, graphics or anything like that. It doesn't have half the features that you've got. And one of the problems with that was that you couldn't. They didn't prioritize the export in their most recent update, so it became a bit of a problem because, you know, and it didn't have the editing features in there. So what you really want to be able to do, if you've got an editor who's not, editors like Word because it's got track changes and it's got sophisticated track changes features, so it's very workable for them. And so you either want to be able to export into something you can put it into Word, but it would also be helpful for people to be able to, particularly if you're doing developmental edits or something like that, to be able to get trackable changes that an editor could potentially come and look at. So I can see that being useful. But I think we're almost out of time now, really, aren't we?
Yeah, I think we are. I have another interview to go to, I'm afraid.
Okay. Well, it's been lovely talking to you, Janet. I've got about a third of the way through the questions I had for this segment, so hopefully I can get our own video environment working again properly, and we can catch up at some point when you're not just coming down off a massive patch that you've updated there. Yeah,
that would be really fun. I'll come back and chat some more about World Anvil.
Yes, great. Thank you very much. So thanks very much for being on the show, Janet, and I will let you go as quickly as possible, and then I'll be adding show links and all that sort of stuff into the into the thing. So people can find you at worldanvil.com.
Yep, you can find us at worldanvil.com, and you can email us at hello@worldanvil.com, just in case you have questions or comments or feature requests or anything else.
Yeah.
And that's us. That's me and Demetrius. We're always there.
Yeah, you're on Facebook as well, I'm assuming, or?
We are on Facebook, we are on Twitter, we are on Instagram, we are even on Pinterest.
Yeah, excellent. Great. Follow World Anvil wherever you need to, folks. There you go. Thanks very much for your time, Janet. And
thanks so much.
Cheers. Bye.